First of all, everyone, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We have participants from all over the world, tons of different time zones. So thank you for making time in your schedule to be with us. We have an aerospace and college panel today, and this is in collaboration between Girls in Aerospace and the Light the Way project. So we'll be introducing each of our organizations, then we'll introduce the speakers, and then we'll get started with some awesome panel questions to help you get to know the speakers a little bit better. So firstly, let's introduce all of our team here. My name is Carolina. I'm the CEO of the Girls in Aerospace Foundation. So for all the Light the Way members here, would you like to unmute and introduce yourselves?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Sanvi. I'm the CEO of Light the Way project.
Hi everyone. My background's acting a bit funky. I'll turn it off in a bit. But then I'm Nicole. I'm the COO of the Light the Way project.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarika and I'm the CTO.
Hey everyone, my name is Pranav and I'm the CCO of Light the Way project.
Yeah, and Garsh couldn't make it here today, but he is the CFO of our team.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been great collaborating with Light the Way, and we'll introduce all their socials and all of that later. So if you guys want to check them out, I highly recommend it. They're having some awesome events, and it's been great to collaborate with them because we have such similar causes. So Sanvi, would you like to introduce what Light the Way is all about?
Yeah, so Light the Way is a peer mentorship platform where students help students. And here's our mission statement. We strive to illuminate students' path to success through peer mentorship and expert guidance. And we hope that through this panel discussion, you can learn through the experiences of the amazing speakers today.
So the Girls in Aerospace Foundation is a global nonprofit. We host usually monthly or bi-monthly events, such as this one, where you can meet aerospace engineers, astronauts, astrophysicists, in this case, aerospace college students in a workshop or a webinar form. And apart from that, we also run a number of other programs, which can all be found on our website. They include a digital magazine and school clubs. You can find everything on our website, girlsinaerospace.org, but some of our featured socials are up here as well, at Girls in Aerospace on Instagram, at Girls in Aero on Twitter, and /Girls in Aerospace on LinkedIn. So now we're going to do a speaker introduction. This is meant to get to know who the speakers are a little bit just from their bios. I'll read off their bios and then I'll have them answer an icebreaker question. And today's icebreaker question is, if you could be a NASA astronaut, a SpaceX astronaut, or a Blue Origin astronaut on one of their respective company missions, which would you choose? So we're going to start with Riley. Riley is currently a university student studying aeronautical engineering and physics at the University of Sydney. In addition, she is currently undertaking an engineering internship with Hypersonix launch systems in Australia. Riley is a strong advocate for women in STEM and is immensely passionate about rocketry and space. When she isn't studying, you'll usually find her reading or building something new. So Riley, would you like to fly on a mission with SpaceX, NASA, or Blue Origin?
I would say NASA, probably. And the only reason for that is because I've been to NASA and met some NASA astronauts. So I feel like I need to follow that along and go with NASA.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I honestly don't know which one I would choose. So I'm going to take some of your guys' answers into consideration in case anyone ever asks me this icebreaker question. Next speaker is Toni. Toni is finishing her second year studying aeronautical engineering at the University of Glasgow and is the president of the Engineers Without Borders Glasgow chapter. She's also the 2020-21 outreach convener of FemEng, a society at the university which aims to empower women into engineering. In her role as outreach convener, she has reached out with 279 pupils from schools all over Scotland and Ireland throughout their first virtual outreach program, set up to continue the delivery of the outreach during the COVID-19 pandemic. She is extremely passionate about encouraging the next generation of engineers or individuals interested in STEM, and is this year's recipient of the GU Principals Award for Civic Engagement. Sustainability and ethical engineering are areas which really are important to Toni, and she hopes to pursue a career in the development of hybrid electric cars for aircrafts. So Toni, would you like to fly with NASA, SpaceX, or Blue Origin?
Oh, this is a really tough question. I think I'm going to have to stick with Riley and go with NASA also. In my second year project, we have been looking at launcher systems. And so I've kind of done a lot of research and things into NASA. So I think I'm going to have to stick with them also.
Awesome. Okay, we've got 2 for NASA so far. Next is Fiona. Fiona graduated from UCLA in 2019 with a BS in geophysics and planetary physics. While there, she conducted research on gravitational anomalies on Mars with Gale Research Lab and presented at the American Geophysical Union during her senior year. Currently, she's in Naval Flight School flying the T-6B Texan. She's passionate about space, science, and all things flight. Fiona, would you choose NASA, SpaceX, or Blue Origin?
I am also going to have to say NASA. It's the OG, you know, so.
I completely understand that, definitely. I think I'm starting to side with NASA here just from all the compelling arguments that I've heard. Next, we have Sabrina. Sabrina is a student at MIT studying planetary science and aerospace engineering. Her research interests include planetary geology, remote sensing, instrumentation, and space policy. She's a strong advocate for women and minorities. She served as the president of the MIT Women in Aerospace Engineering and secretary and founder of the MIT Interracial and Ethnic Division. She currently is the international vice chair of the Women of Aeronautics and Astronautics. So, Sabrina, would you like to fly with NASA, SpaceX, or Blue Origin?
That is a tough question. I think I would probably go with NASA just because I think they'd appreciate geology more, but who knows? SpaceX just got selected for the lunar lander, so I'd go with them. I don't know.
Yeah, tough choice for sure. And last but not least, we have Sarah. Sarah is an undergraduate student pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Physics and Astronomy at the University of Victoria in Canada. She's from Iraq originally, but grew up in the United Arab Emirates. She started her Instagram social media page to share her passion for space and physics, as well as to inspire youths, especially girls in the Middle East, to venture more into the space industry. She likes sharing her personal journey as an international student, the obstacles she faced and or keeps facing, and the beauty of her program. The message that she would like to convey through her content is that no matter how many difficulties one faces, it is vital to keep persisting and persevering in order to achieve great things. So, Sarah, would you choose to fly with NASA, Blue Origin, or SpaceX?
That is such a tough question because I'm always on the fence between either SpaceX or NASA, but I'm gonna have to go with NASA on this one. I just feel like they're doing amazing things now in the space industry, and you have to give them a round of applause for that. So I'm gonna have to choose NASA.
Definitely. Okay, we had NASA all around. So you heard it here first. NASA is apparently the most preferred by aerospace students to fly with if they just randomly got the chance to become an astronaut on the spot. So we're going to transition to the actual questions now. I'm going to stop screen sharing so that you can see all of our speakers here. I have a number of questions prepared, and then at the end, if we have time, we'll have the audience submit some questions so that they can ask, and the speakers will get to answer your individual questions. Our first question is something that should be pretty easy. Just to get to know you a little bit better, it's what inspired you to go into STEM fields? Did you always knew you wanted it, or did a class you took in high school or maybe even in college inspire you to head in that direction? And this can be an open discussion. Whoever wants to speak up first can. We'll just go one by one.
I'm happy to start then. So for me, it's more of a who than a what. So my papa was an electrician and he really inspired me to kind of pursue STEM. We would work on projects together and I would phone him up every week and talk about what I had learned during my school kind of day and the different classes we worked on. And also one of my teachers, so my maths teacher in particular, she was really passionate about STEM and really encouraged me to kind of pursue STEM competitions. And so I kind of learned a lot and was pushed with her. And then also I enjoyed maths, physics and chemistry. So that was a nice wee bonus too.
I'd agree. Having somebody who's passionate about what they do. I had a really passionate astronomy teacher in high school. And from there, just being able to be encouraged to get outside and actually look up at space. And then, yeah, I think from there, just kind of was my thing.
Yeah, I can relate with Toni here. My dad is a software engineer and he also loves cars and he works on cars all the time. So I spent a lot of my childhood coding and working on the cars that were in our garage. And then over time, I kind of started enjoying physics But then I realized I wasn't that good at it, and I moved into geology when I was in college, just kind of because I kind of discovered it. And that's a typical story for a lot of people in geology. I think they kind of take a class, they're like, whoa, this is actually really cool, and it's not just about boring rocks. So
Mine was definitely like a who, not a what as well. My grandfather had a telescope. And so, on night times, he'd be like, come have a look at the moon, come have a look at the moon. And then, I would always be like, whoa, that's so far away. Why can we see it? And, I started asking all these questions and I wanted to just constantly know the answer. And then obviously going to school, I was the kid who asked 5,000 questions all the time because I had to know the answer. So I kind of just fell into it. And you know what? I don't regret it for a second. I absolutely love what I do.
For me, it was more of a what situation, just because when I grew up in Iraq, I just used to watch the skies when I was younger. So I've always had that love for the stars, astronomy ever since I was a kid. But I didn't know what I could do with it until I got into high school, and then I learned that I liked math, numbers, and I liked physics at the end because I just liked how to see everything works. So I think that's what inspired me. I think when I got into college, I was like, okay, I'm going to do physics and astronomy together because I just was so passionate about these two.
Yeah, that's awesome that you guys had so many inspiring people in your lives who pointed you in this direction. And now I see that you're all super happy in your fields so far. So that's really great that you're able to have that influence so early on. The second question is, what's your dream STEM career and how did college help you advance towards it or point you towards it?
Would you like me just to go again?
Of course, anyone can go first. If you have a question or an answer, then absolutely.
No problem. Yeah, so for me, this is a question I always ask myself, and I keep going back to kind of the drawing board almost. As you kind of said in my introduction, I'm really passionate about sustainable energy and ethical engineering. And so I'm working with Engineers Without Borders UK, and they kind of have tied in the fact that this is a career I want to kind of pursue and go down the route of looking into kind of the development and design of hybrid engines for commercial aircrafts. And so kind of using electrolysis and cleaner, safer fuels to kind of burn when aircrafts are flying. That's kind of something that I'd like to go into. Also because I feel like, aircrafts are, I think all of us kind of share this passion that they're just so fascinating and so cool, but also the mode of transport for allowing people to go on holiday or to go to work placements or whatever. And so I feel like having these cleaner engines, people can maybe feel a wee bit less guilty about going on holiday and traveling. And so that's something that I'm really passionate about. And then with regards to university or college, I learn different classes about thermodynamics and propulsion theory. And so that really helps me learn the theory behind what I'm passionate about. And then hopefully I can apply that in industry and work with leading professionals in the fields that I'm passionate about. So that's kind of a wee bit about me.
I definitely am on a similar kind of boat where uni has taught me like the underlying theory about what I'm passionate about and has like really cemented that for me. So, people go on my Instagram, you'll see I love talking about rocket engines, like they're my favorite thing in the world. But it was definitely from uni and learning like thermodynamics and propulsion that has helped me like cement that for myself in the future. But in terms of like beforehand, I always knew that I wanted to be a propulsion engineer and specialize in propulsion. I just like the thing that makes the rocket go fast, essentially. And so, yeah, I already knew that. So I think a lot of my university has been guided by that passion. And so uni's kind of just worked alongside that to help me get on that pathway.
For me, I think I'm kind of lucky because I always wanted to fly and I get to do that right now, which is just the coolest thing in the whole world. But it's interesting being in school. I started to develop a love for research, and I would absolutely love to go work for NASA at some point doing either research or, I don't know, fly for them, something like that. So it's kind of my dream job.
I love that you all kind of knew what you were interested in. I definitely think that I was a little bit more in the opposite boat where I just wasn't sure. I had a bunch of different passions, and I think overall I just loved space. And I spent a lot of college trying to figure out exactly what that meant for me, and where I would kind of fit in the industry. And I think that was probably what I got most out of it is I could spend the first year doing physics and the second year doing aerospace engineering and the third year doing planetary science and the fourth year doing planetary geology. And it took all of those years for me to actually like settle on the major that I really liked. So I think that was the biggest benefit. And then of course, in the interim, when I had internships and things like that, I was able to find those people who were like my career goals, and kind of model my trajectory after them.
I think also like reflecting on what Riley said, I definitely agree because I didn't know how passionate I was until I actually got into university and until I got to take these courses in my program that I was like, oh yeah, like I really love this thing. And, it just made me realize that, okay, this is the right path that I'm on. And it just cemented that idea of physics and astronomy is what I want to do. And it just made me realize that maybe I am one of the lucky ones that got to experience this thing. And because of that, I would say that my dream career in STEM would be to maybe try to alleviate the problem of, underrepresented women, like in those that they face in the Middle East, just because they don't have these resources. So I was wondering, is it possible for me to have my own space research center one day, just so that, they don't really have to go through, or like they don't feel like they're lost in this sea of, like overwhelmness and everything. So I'm thinking of maybe that is my dream career, of maybe to own a space research center one day, and just so that I can, help as many people and women especially as much as I could.
That's amazing. Yeah, we definitely have people here from all around the world, even speakers from so many different countries. So I was wondering, what was your experience with college admissions? I know that those work differently depending on whether you're applying to be an international student or a community college and so on. So was the university you chose your first choice, or did you have other plans? How did that go for all of you?
I'll start. I'll talk about Australia. So in Australia, you have your end of high school exams called the HSC, and essentially you get given a mark out of 100. And universities throughout Australia have different like minimum marks that give you guaranteed entry into the uni. So unless you're doing medicine or law, if you're doing engineering or science, all you have to do is get the mark essentially, and then you get to go into whatever university you preference. So for me, because I achieved the mark that I needed for engineering, I got straight into my first preference. So I feel like that's a very easy and unique experience that isn't felt in a lot of countries all over the world. So I'm very lucky and fortunate, and I'm grateful that I got into my dream course in uni.
Yeah, I can talk a wee bit about Scotland. So for ourselves, we have exams during our secondary, and they kind of gradually build up. And so depending on the university and depending on the course you're looking for, you require a certain level of grades. And then all of the university or students that are applying to university apply through UCAS in the UK. And so that is a system where we can put in all of our predicted grades and previous grades throughout our time at school, and also upload a personal statement as well. And so that's sent out to all of the universities that you choose to apply for. And then they respond whether it's a yes or a no. And then you kind of go from there and confirm your final choice. So for me, I was torn between two universities and went to different open days, spoke to different students that were studying and also the academics, and ended up at Glasgow. And I'm so happy I decided to study at Glasgow.
I can quickly speak to the US. I'm sure some of you are already familiar with the process, but you'd start by taking your SATs and your ACT exams in junior year, and then senior year again, and maybe your AP exams. I think a lot of schools are moving away from standardized testing at this point, and especially with COVID. So you might not need to take them as anymore, but always something to keep in mind. And then you would probably spend the most of your senior year, maybe the last your junior summer, looking at different schools, figuring out what things are most important to you, potentially visiting if you can. I know this year has been tough for visits, but maybe next year in the summer. And then you would, write up a personal statement for each of the schools. You might even just do the Common App, which is just a centralized application portal for a lot of different universities. And that they're normally due around November, December. And then of course we have the early action, early decision, regular decision periods. And you guys can go look those up afterwards if you're not familiar. But they basically just, it's a matter of when you get accepted into the university. And if you're applying regular decision, you generally find out around March of the following year. And then you have maybe a month to make your decision. And that's when a lot of students will go and do more visits to figure out where they're actually interested in. On my end, I think I pretty much got my first choice and I was pretty happy with it, but I did my due diligence. I went and visited and just made sure that I was making the right decision for myself. Although I don't know if I would have made the same decision if I could go back, but that's a different story.
Yeah, so I also went through the process in the US. I didn't get into my first choice. My family's from Michigan and I wanted to go to the University of Michigan and applied for engineering, didn't get in. I actually applied to UCLA as engineer too, didn't get in as an engineer, came in as astrophysics and ultimately changed my mind and found geophysics, similar to Sabrina's story about geology. Sometimes you just take a class and you love it. But yeah, I will say it was disappointing to not get into my first choice, but ultimately I ended up where I was supposed to be.
For Canada, I think when I wanted to apply for universities here, I had like a representative that was doing like the Canadian universities at the time. So she told me like, hey, if you want to do physics and astronomy, then these are your options. So every university had a list of requirements basically, but like the most common documents you would say between all of them was the SATs and an English proficiency exam, which is like the IELTS or something like that, just because UAE is not like officially an English country. So I had to do those and then obviously get the minimum passing requirement for the grade on those exams. And then I had to send in my transcripts from my high school in the UAE. And I applied to, I believe, 4 universities. UVic was one of them, and UBC was also one of them, where I got, for UVic, I got like a full entry scholarship, and then for UBC, I got a partial entry scholarship. So I saw UVic was a small, like nice island, and people were so friendly over there, and the weather was so nice. So I was like, and hey, I got a full scholarship, so maybe why not choose that as a great university to go to? So, and I believe it was the right choice for me because the people here are so accepting, so nice, and I've learned a lot of things.
Thank you. You guys are definitely all role models for me, and I'm sure so many other people in the Zoom call when it comes to the universities that you attend. I'm not sure about the acceptance rates for out of US universities, but MIT and UCLA are both extremely selective. So I definitely admire all of you for getting into them and succeeding in whatever majors you chose. The next question is something that we already touched on a little bit earlier with why you chose STEM, but in this question, it's how did you know you wanted to go into aerospace specifically? And did you have any doubts about that earlier where you thought maybe aerospace isn't for me? Do I want to choose a different field? Was there any time and moment where you thought maybe I don't like aerospace, maybe I do? Did you ever get tossed up in that?
Yeah, so for me, it was a yes and no situation. At school, I loved my STEM subjects, and I didn't actually know what engineering was until probably about third year. So maybe when I was about 14, 15. And then fell in love because it ticked all of my boxes. I was curious. I liked to solve problems. I would ask tons of questions and look for the answers. And so engineering was just something that ticked all of these boxes. But when I was at school, I still wasn't sure what field of engineering to go into. And I was lucky enough to do my work experience at GE Aviation Caledonian. And I spent a week working with all of their engineers and their technicians and apprentices, and just fell in love. I worked through the stages from stripping the engines, repairing the engines, building the engines, and then testing the engines. And I think the light bulb moment for me was when I was with their test engineers. It was the last kind of person I was with for the week. And they were all kind of winding down, and there was actually, luckily enough, an engine, so their Gen X engines, which were being tested. And so I was all safetied up, harnessed and everything, went through all the safety procedures and was allowed in the testing hub with the engine. And so I was completely blown away, metaphorically, obviously. I was harnessed in, but that was just the moment where I fell in love with engines, and then I was applying to study aeronautical engineering. So that was me.
Like I touched on earlier, in high school, got really into astronomy. So, and my dad's a pilot, so I always kind of had a love of flight and space. I'd say that there were definitely times throughout school that I thought, oh my gosh, this is way too hard. I can't do this. But I always came back to what I was learning was so cool. So when I started studying planetary science, it was just amazing to look around at the world here and be able to apply that to places in our own solar system like Mars or Venus. And yeah, it's just so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of also touched on a little bit of my uncertainty, but yeah, I started off in physics, and I really thought that that would be the place for me. Like, you know, same with you, Fiona. I was like, oh, astrophysics is amazing. I'm totally going to do that. And then I was just like, I'm not good enough at this, and I don't think that this is really the right place for me. So I kind of went back to the drawing board in sophomore year and just looked at all of the majors that were available. And I saw aerospace engineering was like, and that's just seemed like an obvious next choice, because, you know, if you're trying to do research and be involved in the aerospace industry, then why not do an aerospace engineering major? So that's how I ended up doing it. But then I also had a little bit of doubts when I realized how broad aerospace when you start, because there are, you know, you can be in propulsion, you can be in robotic space exploration, you can be in just, oh, sorry, my headphones are just connecting. So I kind of, yeah, did a lot of soul searching in my like sophomore and junior years to try and figure out, and I ended up taking a few geology classes, and I was like, oh, so this is like what happens after you land a rover on Mars. You just basically do geology from a distance. And that was really like the light bulb moment when I was kind of like, oh, wow, okay, so this is actually really cool. And this is how you do science, you know, with remote sensing and with all these different techniques. And that's kind of ultimately how I iterated down to where I kind of am today.
For me, I actually wanted to do medicine. So I went through all of high school being like, I'm going to go do medicine, I'm going to be a surgeon. And I was all set to go down that pathway, had done work experience at a hospital and everything. And then what happened was I went to boarding school and my parents moved to Houston, Texas, and I would go over and visit them. And I still loved space. And so, I had to go to NASA, and I actually sat down with an astronaut, and, we had a bit of a talk. And then I was like, doing aerospace engineering. And so I applied for that, and then, I love it and I don't regret it for a second. I mean, there's certainly times, like, especially assignments, and I'm sure everyone would get this, but you're sitting there and going, oh my God, this is so hard. And you definitely have uncertainty most of the time. But at the end of the day, I have to remember why I'm doing it, and I just really want to make things go fast.
Yeah, I definitely have the same experience as everybody else. I didn't want to, admit in the beginning that, oh, I was facing hardships or obstacles throughout my program or degree, because I was like, no, like there's no way I can do this. But then at some point, it actually got so overwhelming just because of all the due dates and all the material that we were learning in our courses, because it's different when you're doing like physics and like it's different when you're doing just astronomy or physics. When you're doing physics and astronomy, like it's really insane because the amount of courses that you have to take is like almost double that of a degree on its own. So the amount of material that I learned, I was like, whoa, that's too much. So I definitely thought of, I was like, maybe what if I just took one subject like astronomy or physics? So I definitely had that thought throughout my university career. But then I was like, no, like I've learned so much. I've actually grown so much out of these obstacles. And the fact that I'm still here, I'm still pursuing this is just a great sign of my strength as a person. And I've got to learn so much about who I am. And I mean, before I even like in my first year of university, I also took a lot of courses that were not in my core subjects, like philosophy, sociology, psychology, all these things, just so I can know, like, I want to do physics and astronomy for sure. And gladly, that's how the result turned out to be. I am so glad I got, I stuck with it until now. So I'm really, really glad. It's just because I get to see the research that's being done in this area, the study cases that we do, like especially my coding courses, is just amazing how you can actually see for yourself what's going on and what's actually happening. Is amazing, incredible.
That's amazing. And I love that all of you have such similar responses, but they're all kind of tweaked to your situations, your unique circumstances. So this is really great. The next question has to do with the fact that aerospace is traditionally known as not a very diverse field. Usually women in aerospace will find themselves in a severe gender minority. So does being in aerospace shape the way that you see diversity in STEM at all?
So at my internship with Hypersonix Launch Systems, we actually have 50% women and 50% male, which is amazing. The catch to that is that all of the women are majority business development and not really engineers. So when I came in and did my engineering internship, I was the only female in the engineering office. I mean, from classes usually being like one of a few girls, you kind of get used to it, which is sad. But it was just, I walked into this office and I wasn't really intimidated that there wasn't any other girls there. And, I got to bring the female dynamic into the workplace. But in saying that, like, it shouldn't be that way. It should be more equal. And I'm definitely am passionate about getting more women involved, because especially in Australia, there's such a big emphasis on like girls' schools and boys' schools. And I know a lot of the girls' schools mainly focus on like sport or dance and drama. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's not really any programs to get women interested in STEM or aerospace in general. So I had to make my own opportunities when I was in high school to, I don't know, live my passion for STEM. So I definitely see, even here in Australia, there is quite a diversity problem.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I think depending on where you look, there are lots of variations in the kinds of diversity you're going to see. I would say in the undergraduate level, you will probably not have even male to female, but you will probably certainly have less racial diversity, and at least in the US, a lot less international students, just because it's really hard to get past regulations like ITAR and EAR, which, if you're interested in coming to the US as an international student, that's unfortunately something you have to face. And everyone is trying to fix that problem, but not much traction so far. If you're looking at faculty at universities, I haven't seen a case where it's been either, there's been gender parity or racial diversity. Certainly very few LGBTQ in the faculty, and that has a lot to do with the pipeline. And then in industry, if you're looking at like a place like just Lockheed, for example, like an old established aerospace company, you're definitely going to see a lot of old white men. And it's a generation that is like reaching retirement. And so there'll definitely be probably a boost in the diversity that we're going to see over the next decade or 2 decades. But it's also reflective of, that this incoming generation is much more diverse and a lot more people are excited about aerospace. And I would definitely say that we're entering kind of like a new space era. So there's a lot of diversity that has to do with that as well. And if you go to somewhere like NASA, JPL, for example, which is where I've been for the last few years, it's very diverse. So it's a mixed bag, and you just have to be aware of it. It's not something you can really avoid, but things are changing.
Yeah, I need to echo this completely as well. Personally, when I've been on placements or even studying at school, I was the only girl in my physics class when I was in secondary school. And I think there is slowly starting to be change. I was doing a wee bit of digging into the University of Glasgow's kind of statistics, because I'm a bit of a geek that way. And so for Aero specifically, we have this year, so the cohort that's coming in that are kind of the applicant cycle of 2021, so this isn't including offers that have been made or accepted yet, but 18.4% of the intake are expected to be female, which isn't great. And compared with other disciplines as well, so for example, biomedical engineering, they're sitting at roughly 58.6%, so a drastic difference. Overall percentage of females coming into the University of Glasgow is roughly about 24.6% though, so not great, but it could be so much worse. And I think I've been speaking to the head lecturer of Aero, and there's definitely kind of the scope in the room that they're wanting to do better in these areas and things. And so it's not something that the School of Engineering at University of Glasgow is happy with just sitting at this right now, which is really promising. But yeah, I think there's a lot more that people can do. And I think it's like events like these and raising awareness and things that can help encourage females into engineering. But yeah, so I think it's a difficult situation, but definitely growing, I think, from where we've been in the past.
Yeah, echoing about events and just raising awareness. Like, I remember being in physics or calculus classes, and there were like maybe 6 women, and these were very big classes. And I didn't necessarily notice it, but sometimes like I don't know, you just feel like a little alone. And so just finding other women, I think is like really important, and like supporting each other no matter what is really important too. And not seeing other women as competition, kind of like we're all trying to make it here. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. I even remember when I was in high school in the UAE, I had this idea that, being in the STEM field is going to be so different, like it's going to be so diverse, and, you'll have a lot of women working there, a lot of women from underrepresented minorities as well. But then when I came to university and I saw the statistics, I was so shocked. I was like, wow, this is really happening, like in the 21st century. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, definitely. However, with that being said, I definitely think there is a change. I mean, especially in the Middle East, like with the UAE's Hope probe, like over 80% of the missions team are actually women. So that's amazing. But the change is slow and the change is long overdue. I think that that change is supposed to happen years ago. But nevertheless, it's changed and it's good. And I also think that, reflecting on my classes when I was when I took those first year like physics and calculus classes, those were like there were so many boys, I mean males, and there were just so many women, like so few women in those classes. So I was like, maybe this is going to change, and it did. I mean, in the past 2 semesters, I've seen more women in my department. However, it's just I can say it's just me and someone else who are from international backgrounds, like Middle East and from an India background. So that definitely needs to to change, just because I think people from different backgrounds bring so many new perspectives and point of views that maybe other people did not see or realize, especially. So reflecting on all of those ideas and working on projects together, I think would be very beneficial. And I think that's why, this is the point of having events like this, to raise awareness of how women in STEM and aerospace are going to, increase the efficiency of these workplaces.
Definitely. Those are all such great viewpoints that you all share and great advice that you put towards how can we make a difference? How can we change this? The next question is about giving advice to your younger self. So if you could tell your high school senior self or last grade of high school one piece of advice about all the things you've learned throughout your time at uni, what would you say?
I would say to, very like cliche, but never give up on your dreams. However, accept that they do flex and change. So sometimes I would find myself so stuck on like, I want to be this. Like I was so like, I want to be an astrophysicist. But the thing is that I still have that passion about space and about flight that I always had. It just changed how it looked. And that's super okay. And I'm so much like, I'm so happy where I'm at. So definitely, be able to accept that sometimes things change.
Mine would probably be, firstly, I think I would probably have taken my first year and have explored a bit more of the majors a little, and just kind of kind of what Fiona was just saying, instead of being so committed and dead set on one thing, just branching out and figuring out what I like by taking a bunch of different classes or joining different clubs, something like that. Second thing I would say, as someone who is probably going to go to grad school, is that, if you're interested in research, I would spend maybe the first year or 2 years finding a good research project and then stick with it. Because there's opportunities to get papers out there, to do conference presentations, just to attend a conference. All of that is valuable experience. And because I was flip-flopping every semester which research project I was working on, I never really got that long-term experience of working on those things. So I would, on a technical end, if you're looking for a resume builder and just an experience builder, I would highly recommend doing that.
For me, I would probably say you did it. I got to university, it was all worth it, and I'm studying my dream course. However, to kind of echo other points, that it is tough and there will be challenges that you need to face, and you just need to believe in yourself that you can do this. And also don't be afraid to ask for help. I was kind of the type of person that would look back and kind of think that if I can't do this, I need to figure this out myself. And I wouldn't want to ask for help, but it's okay to ask for help. And there's people that are willing to help you out. If it's tutorials, if it's exams that you don't achieve what you're looking for and things, there's definitely ways about it. And there isn't one set route. There's lots of different ways into engineering and into aerospace and aviation, or even STEM. So yeah, that's kind of advice, and also kind of celebrating successes.
My biggest advice to my younger self would be have a work-life balance. In year 12, so final year of school, I just worked. I was sleeping terribly. I didn't really hang out with friends. I kind of didn't really have friends as a result of that. That's a different story. And I just totally burnt myself out. I mean, I got the marks in the end that I wanted, but I didn't really enjoy being in high school. And I kind of followed through with that mentality for the first 2.5 years of uni. And it wasn't really until COVID, when, you know, you're being at home and by yourself, that I was like, I need to stop doing work and see like people, or I'm going to go slightly insane. And so I think, I mean, now in Australia, we're pretty much back to normal, which we're so lucky. So, I mean, I've definitely over this last year been trying to be like, okay, I'm going to work now. And then, you know, I'm going to take all of Saturday off and just go hang out with my friends all day and not feel guilty about it. And then go back to work on Sunday. And honestly, it's so important because you get to keep your relationships with people, and, you know, your body needs a break, your brain needs a break. Like, I've been burnt out so many times. And so my biggest piece of advice is find a way to not burn yourself out.
Building up on what Riley said, I definitely would say invest in hobbies, like find time to have some hobbies alongside your high school or your studying. I think playing a musical instrument or maybe investing in reading books or even writing short stories would go a very long way, just because not only would they stimulate your brain other than studying, but they would also help you in your future courses in college if you decided to go to one. Writing stories can, enhance your ability to write reports, for example, stuff like that. And playing musical instruments would allow you to be more creative, for example. So definitely invest in a hobby that you like, not that someone forces on you. Like, if you say that, hey, I want to play a musical instrument, try it, pick it up. Maybe you can be great at it someday and famous, you never know. So definitely have a hobby that you work on aside from just studying and just worrying about what your grades will look like, because high school is a precious time, and if that time goes away and then you regret it when you're older, then you can never get it back.
Those are all excellent pieces of advice. As a high school student, I'm definitely going to take some of those to heart, see how I can apply them in my own life. I've definitely experienced burnout and not having time to spend with friends because of studying and all of that. I'm sure a lot of people here have. So thank you so much for all of that advice. So I know that a lot of you have pursued internships in college. We talked about in her intro, Riley is currently an intern at Hypersonix. So do any of you other panelists have experience with internships? What is your advice with internships? Do you have any other information that you'd like to share about them?
I can start. I worked at Axion Systems my freshman year, which was a startup in electric propulsion. So they make these little tile thrusters that are like this big, and you stick them on CubeSats and it propels CubeSats, which is really cool. And then I spent the last 3 years working at NASA JPL, 2 years as a testbed engineer on the Mars 2020 rover, and then the last year as a science team member on the Mars Science Laboratory, which is the Curiosity rover. I would say that my biggest advice, if you are interested in getting a job at NASA at least, is to force your foot in the door. You've really got to send out cold emails to anyone you'd like to work with, and kind of hope they respond. If you've ever applied to an internship at NASA, it's like this giant portal, and you send in your application, and then it's just like a black hole. It just sucks it up, and then don't get anything out of it. Sometimes you'll get a response. I do know some people who have like heard back on that portal, but I personally have not had much success on that. Mostly what I've done is just kind of like force feed people my resume. And then, eventually they'll respond, or they'll be like, oh, I know someone who's looking for an intern right now. even when I was like just starting off in planetary geology, I made a very, very like quick switch from engineering to geology within a semester, actually. So I had no experience. And I just emailed like 30 people. And one of them was like, hey, I need an intern. And she turned out to be the deputy principal scientist for the Mars 2020 rover. So I got really lucky in that respect. And I highly recommend just like, you can even email me and I can email your email out to like 100 people and you'll probably get something. So yeah, cold emailing is the way.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I definitely agree with forcing your foot through the door, because my internships I got from networking and just, so for example, I had a previous internship at Sabre Astronautics, and I had applied with them through the portal, didn't hear anything back. I had an opportunity to meet their CEO and director, and I was like, I can do this for you. And then I just kept spamming the CEO with emails, and he was like, that's it, you've got an internship, stop emailing me. I mean, probably not the best course of action, but at the end of the day, it got me in. And then my other internship at Hypersonix, I got through networking. So I got like partnered with the CEO of the company, and we kind of started a mentorship, and he kind of just, I don't know, segued into an internship, and I'm still here a year and a half later. So I definitely agree that you kind of need to find a way to force yourself into the door.
I think another important thing is knowing how to talk about yourself. So on your resume or whatever it is when you're trying to network, know what you can bring to the table. And sometimes that's not having a 4.0. So I worked with a research lab and I didn't have a 4.0. I was a very mediocre student, but I had a lot of other skills that I could bring. I'm a good team player. I had leadership experience. All of those things make you a team player and are really important to know how to broadcast to your audience. So.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to echo everything as well. So personally, I haven't had an internship. This is kind of the stage that I'm looking for internships right now. And so I'll be definitely taking advice on board. But to add to that, I would definitely say kind of keep in touch with the people that you've worked with or spoken to and kind of remind them. So for me, I've kept in touch. I was able to go on work experiences at GE and at Rolls-Royce and at Woodward. And so every now and then I'll sometimes drop a wee email and kind of remind people that I still exist. And so actually I have been working, I emailed out, reached out to GE a couple of months ago because I was involved in a project with FemEng, and so we are getting involved with their apprentices and they're going to be involved in calls to discuss with pupils that university and college is not the only option, and I think that's also really important to highlight as well. But with that, we were able to kind of keep in touch and build a relationship as well, that I'm able to gain something out of it and they're able to gain something out of it as well. And so in a couple of years to come or a couple of months time, I'll reach out again and different things like that. So definitely kind of keep in touch with the people that you meet. LinkedIn's obviously amazing. I think everyone or most people that I know are on LinkedIn, and so it's great to see what other people are doing and sharing posts as well. But yeah, I think keeping in touch with people, keeping contacts, and I've also spoken to the apprentice coordinator at GE, and they are willing for me to share contacts as well. So I'll pass everything over to Carolina. So if you're sending emails and things to the Girls in Aerospace Foundation, then you can have that as well. If you want to drop Carolina a wee email, I'll send everything over.
Awesome. I'll definitely take advantage of that. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Echoing on that, yeah, I definitely think that you should build your network for sure. And, being involved in that specific job or field that you want to pursue is definitely very important. I think that establishing a connection or some sort of relationship with whatever you're networking with can go a long way. They can, if not get you that specific internship, they can definitely give you advice on how to move forward and how to do the necessary steps that you need to take in order for you to get that internship or something similar at least. So definitely build your network as much as you can and go to social events that have some benefit from that, like someone who is pretty known in that specific field, or someone who is a professor or an instructor at any university even, or even talking to your fellow classmates or students in that specific university who have done these internships before, these types of internships before. I think having a solid network foundation can definitely go a long way, and they can even be great reference resume. So
I'm gonna say actually plug in one thing here, which is that kind of the fake it till you make it mentality. A lot of the times you're going to be looking at internships that you may or may not be qualified for. And I personally think being qualified should not be a prerequisite for you sending in an application. The internships are there for you to learn things. And so you going in there and learning how to do the thing you've been hired for is kind of the purpose of it. So yeah, I think, don't be afraid if you don't know what the heck the internship is about in the first place. Just put yourself out there, get the internship, learn on the way, and then you have the skill set to advertise for the next time you're looking.
That was some excellent advice all around that I'm sure anyone can benefit from, even if it's just about networking. I think putting your foot in the door is always a great suggestion to have with whatever opportunities you're trying to get for yourself. The next question is related to the fact that many of you are involved in social work and programs to aid the involvement of women and minorities in STEM. How do you think people can help women and minorities get more involved in STEM, just the average person who isn't personally in an aerospace or STEM field?
I think just talking about your passions always gets other people excited, even if they're not necessarily interested. Like, listening to everyone here on the panel, when, you're talking about something you're passionate about, you get really into it and enthusiastic, and it gets like carried along, and people like, I know, for example, I have lots of friends because I worked in hospitality outside of uni. Like, they're not interested necessarily in STEM or pursuing a career in that. But when they hear you talk about it, they're always like, oh my God, that's so exciting. Like, and just, it gets general people interested in it. Like, they, now I have friends who are bartenders who are like, are you watching the space launch? Like, oh my God. Like, they're not even interested in it. And now because of me ranting on about rockets all the time, they're like, yes, I want to watch this too. So, that's how you can get, the general public involved. I mean, I'm not necessarily involved in many organizations here in Australia to promote STEM because we don't really have them. So, I mean, my Instagram is me being like, I'm passionate about it. Like, my latest posts were just of the new mission control that opened. And, I'm just like, guys, how cool is this? I got to go sit in it. Like, imagine what we could do. Getting people excited about it is the biggest thing. And you don't necessarily need to be in a group or organization to do that. Just be passionate about what you love.
Echoing Riley, I definitely agree that you just start a conversation with people. I think that will get the ball rolling for sure. I definitely, personally at least, I think that, STEM fields tend to be, imaginative and creative. So I think even someone who is not in a STEM field or in aerospace or aerospace engineering, they would find whatever you're talking about kind of interesting at least. So I think just advocating for science and being a science communicator is really a great step towards that involvement. And also regarding how we can help women, speaking from my own personal experience, I mean, once I started my own, social media page, I found that women from the Middle East were kind of reaching out to me and telling me, we would love to come to Canada maybe to study or pursue a STEM degree. And knowing that I helped them, at least with some sort of doubt or concern that they had regarding that area is, the most amazing thing I have ever heard. So I think that's why actually I started my own, my own page, is to show support to these people in the Middle East who don't really have these resources or these figures that they can go to and ask questions, just because of that STEM awareness is not as high as it is here in Canada and the US. So, just having someone from the Middle East identifying as a woman come out and say, you know, Sarah, like you, like say, talking about this and this subject has helped me get through my course in high school in math or calculus. It was just so amazing to hear. And I think that is just one small step in like a big involvement. So I think that's great.
Definitely. I think also to kind of follow on with all of this is events like this as well, and people being seen, and that it isn't a scary and taboo kind of subject, women in STEM or women in engineering. I think having conversations is really important with whether that's with people who can make change, about kind of going about encouraging women and having organisations and programmes, but also, as Riley and Sarah were saying, just the general public, having conversations, showing your passion and enthusiasm. It might just spark something in their heads that there's like, oh, I'll go and do some research into that. In terms of my involvement, I'm really fortunate to have been involved with FemEng. So they are a society at the University of Glasgow with the aims to empower women into STEM and into science. And so my role this year was their outreach, and so I kind of created programs and things for the local kind of Glasgow area schools, but also schools in Scotland and in Ireland. And I think with that and the feedback we kind of heard from everyone was the fact that it was for girls, younger girls, to see us and to kind of see that I could do that, or I could relate to someone in some way, but also the younger boys seeing us also, and that it wasn't taboo, and it's not going to be when they're going to secondary school or whatever that they are kind of confused as why women are studying STEM, and that we can all encourage and work together. Again, we were touching on this earlier, it's about women supporting women. And so having mentors and different people that you can look up to and kind of grow with them and yourself so that you can inspire the next generation of engineers or people studying STEM. I think that's something that's really important also.
Yeah, I have to second all of that. I think that there is, as much as I hate to say this, I feel that there are a lot of forces that act against women and minorities when they're younger, when it comes to entering into STEM fields. A lot of microaggressions, a lot of small things that build up to you ultimately saying, maybe this isn't right for me. I have definitely felt it at points. And, you know, I just think it's probably my just excitement and uncertainty about other things, other fields I could pursue that made me enter STEM in the first place. Yeah, SciComm helps. Science communication is a really big thing, and not to be selfish, but it's something that can help you as well. I would argue that the best papers out there are written by people who actually make an effort to help you understand, instead of writing it in a way that's totally comprehensive. It doesn't make any sense. It's too much jargon, that kind of thing. So it can help you by being a really good science communicator in the long run and professionally. And lastly, I would say, you know, if you want to just to plug Women in Aeronautics and Astronautics, which is the organization that I'm a part of. So WOA does a lot of outreach. We try and do technical development, professional development, the works. We have a lot of chapters across the United States, and then we're an international organization. So we've also got 2 chapters in India and Nepal. So, you know, it doesn't really take much to start a chapter. You just need to be interested in aerospace and want to bring people on. And, you know, everyone in the WOA organization is there to support you to start a new chapter in a new country or wherever. You can start a regional chapter, a professional chapter at a company or things like that. So yeah, I would say there are a lot of organizations popping up for women in aerospace in the last few years. And they're really good support networks. And I would say that if you're a woman in aerospace or in any STEM field, having a network is really, really valuable.
And the last thing that I'd say about that is with those networks, just being honest and supporting each other. You know, we all are struggling with imposter syndrome and all sorts of things, and it is a difficult field to be in. And there aren't really answers sometimes, which is really hard. But yeah, just talking about those things, it makes you feel less alone and you can support one another.
Building up, one last thing that I wanted to say is actually, I've just thought about this now, I think to involve women more, not just in aerospace, but in any field, is to give them a chair at the executive table. Like, not just hire women at these like entry level positions, but give them a position where it is, a decision making position, basically. Just because, I mean, come on, let's face it, women have amazing organizational skills. They have amazing problem solving skills, at critical thinking, and etc. And I think having this woman perspective on a team in a position where the said woman is being able to decide or not decide is going to be very beneficial for any organization.
Those are definitely all amazing points. I think Toni and Sabrina, you touched on this, where you have to see yourself in a field in order to be able to want to go in it. So I always liked space, I liked astronomy and all of that, but I never really saw female aerospace engineers, never saw them in the media, never saw them in books or movies. So I didn't really see myself as even having that option. So it took me going into organizations and networks and nonprofits and kind of finding some role models for myself to recognize that these people were in my situation, 10 or 5 years ago. So I can totally go in their footsteps. So I think forming those role models and sharing your story with younger women and minorities who might want to go into aerospace is super critical. So we are at about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to open it up to audience questions before we go on to our last question. If we don't get audience questions, we can always just do that last one. But if anyone from the audience has a question, feel free to just pop it into the chat and we can ask the panelists. And Nicole and Sanvi, if you have any questions from your organizations that have been DM'd to you throughout, feel free to unmute and ask those as well.
I have a question that I'll just ask aloud rather than in the chat. For internship, so I'm currently a freshman at CU Boulder, and I'm studying aerospace engineering. What year do you guys recommend for people or experience yourself as when you started looking for those internships and looking for those opportunities? Because obviously this summer I have not done anything yet, but I'm looking towards like sophomore year. So what do you recommend for high schoolers going into college?
I think that if you haven't started college yet, try and just get, I don't know, a week of just shadowing someone. It really opens your eyes up to what goes on behind the scenes in the industry. I mean, in terms of applying for internships, I started applying from day one, year one, because what's the worst that they're going to do, right, is they say no. Like, it's not the end of the world. But, you might come across someone who's like, you're not ready for an internship yet, but come and have a look at our office, get to know us, and, you're expanding your network. So my advice is, just start talking to people and apply. And at the end of the day, think to yourself, what's the worst that could happen? And that is they say no. And to me, I honestly don't think that that's a bad thing at all.
Totally agree. For me, I was able to go on work experiences with different aviation industries once I kind of decided that aviation was for me. But personally, in terms of internships, I'm now towards the end of my second year, and that's now when I'm also starting to look and apply and reach out. So I think, as Riley was saying, it's never too early. And so whenever you feel comfortable, and even if it is just having a coffee or something, if it's practicing interview skills as well, that's so beneficial also. So just kind of gaining practice and skills yourself, I think that's invaluable.
Yeah, for me, full disclosure, I was applying in high school, probably my junior year, and I was soundly rejected both years that I applied in high school. And yeah, you can start in high school. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that in college, you have probably a higher chance of getting accepted to an internship, and even in freshman year, it can be difficult. Yeah, I think there is no right answer to this. And you could even wait to do an internship until you feel like you've settled into a major that you're satisfied with. But in terms of applying, I think there's also a lot to be said for looking at programs, like institutional programs that you might have at universities or your high schools or in companies, because they can kind of connect you with the right people that will give you the internship, and maybe the school is paying for it or something like that. That's how I got my first internship in college, or my first internship ever really, was kind of through an entrepreneurial program at my school, which fed into these different companies near the university. So yeah, I don't think there's a right answer to this. You just, whenever you feel ready.
Well, thank you guys.
I also think that maybe if you wanted to apply, yeah, I think you would just apply right away. I mean, just like as Riley was saying, worst case scenario is they say no, but just keep your mind open that, you know, of the possibility of getting rejected. Like, don't just put all your hopes up in that one internship, because in case they say no, then you won't get disappointed and you won't just feel rejected. And also, if you know, in the worst case scenario they did say no, I think it is a way for you to learn more about yourself and see what skills you are missing or what skills that you have that you can implement on later in the future when you go into college. So I think no matter the outcome of whatever, whenever you want to apply, I think it just take it as a way of, you know, I've learned so much about this from myself. I grew out of this, and now I have certain set of skills that I know will be beneficial to me in the future, and I have a set of skills that I know that I need to work on in the future.
Those are all really excellent responses. I'll definitely take those for myself too when I eventually go to college and start looking at internships, to just apply for everything, because the worst they could do is say no, and it will always give me more chances to refine what I like and don't like. So we have just about reached the end of our panel time. I want to leave a few extra seconds for the panelists to drop any contact info, LinkedIn, email, Instagram in the chat, so that any questions that got unanswered can be contacted to the actual panelists. So if you have any questions that you didn't get to ask, please feel free to reach out to them. I'm sure that they would love to help you with whatever questions that you have. However, our panel does end at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So thank you all for tuning in. I know that we're from a ton of different time zones. Some of you, it's very late at night. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you all enjoyed this. I will be sending out a email, or we'll put it on the Girls in Aerospace Instagram story with the Instagram tags of all the panelists here. So feel free to reach out to them through Instagram if you aren't able to contact them otherwise. And with that, thank you so much.